focus of today's hearing is Google's online advertising business, whether it's a monopolist and whether it might have engaged in any conduct that harms competition and harms consumers. But before we go into that, I want to say just a few things about antitrust policy more broadly. I've been a member of this subcommittee ever since 2011, when I first arrived in the Senate. And I've chaired the subcommittee for almost 6 years. Over that time, as the public debate surrounding antitrust policy and enforcement has grown and in some cases evolved, so too has the gulf between the opposing sides. At one extreme, there are those who would rather that we have no antitrust laws at all. In the alternative, they advocate for an enforcement policy that's overly deferential to speculative efficiencies and quick to dismiss actual evidence of competitive harm whenever it might conflict with unproven economic theories. This extreme end of the continuum sort of fetishizes freedom to the exclusion of the laws that maintain that very freedom. They forget that markets, like governments, do not keep themselves free, and that liberty is only secure when power is diffused. At the other extreme, however, is a line of arguments that has for years now been pushing an agenda to transform the antitrust laws in this country from a tool based in economic science to protect and promote competitive markets into a sort of panacea for all of their perceived social ills. Built on the economically myopic premise that big is bad, and that's the beginning and the end of the question, some in this end of the spectrum would use antitrust to address alleged labor, income, and racial disparities. These may be laudable goals, but they're not problems that antitrust law is meant to solve, nor are they problems that antitrust law is even capable of solving, at least not without creating a whole bunch of other problems, even within those areas themselves. Attempts to repurpose antitrust law into a social justice program would have scores of unintended consequences that would cripple our economy for generations. And of course, there is the hypocrisy in believing that big is bad applies only to corporations and not to government bureaucracy, the very type of government bureaucracy that they would expand in order to dismantle and regulate them. You may be wondering where I see myself in those two extremes. Whose side am I on? Am I on the side of the American people? Yes. Am I on the side of the law? Yes. I believe vigorous enforcement of antitrust laws is essential to maintaining the free markets that have made this the most prosperous nation on earth. And I believe that our current laws are, for the most part, sufficient to meet the challenges of the day. I said a moment ago that liberty is only secure when power is diffused. This is a bedrock principle of our constitutional republic. The concept of federalism, perhaps the greatest contribution of the founding generation and of our founding document, is what makes America unique among all other nations. This principle applies equally to economic power as it does to political power. In a way, antitrust laws might properly be described as federalism for the economy. That brings us to today. We're here to discuss what may be the seminal antitrust case of the 21st century, one whose precedent will define the terms of competition and innovation in our dynamic economy for years, in fact, for decades to come. Unlike some of my colleagues in the House, I'm not interested in staging a political spectacle to attack, to condescend, and to talk over witnesses. Naive though it may be in 2020, my hope is that by looking at this specific question, we can have a serious and frank conversation about the state of competition in digital markets. Online advertising is an incredibly complex business and one that touches every single person on the internet. The technologies involved in connecting advertisers and publishers have evolved rapidly in the last decade, and the expansion of online advertising has facilitated an explosion of online content by allowing even the smallest website owners to monetize the content they produce. Small and local businesses have also benefited from being able to quickly and easily promote their businesses without any of the same capital investments that would have been required and indispensable for that effort just a few decades ago. So, at the same time, this growth and this expansion has been largely consolidated onto a single platform, Google's online ad business. As that business has grown, so too have complaints that Google, which both operates the ad selling and ad buying platforms and sells its own inventory through those platforms, has conflicts of interest and thus has manipulated or rigged online ad technologies and auctions to favor its own interest and protect its own market share. Whether this is true or not matters, because so many businesses depend upon digital advertising to market their products or to monetize the content that they produce. Web users, in turn, benefit from free online content and being connected to relevant businesses in a way that helps them to make optimal business decisions. Simply put, markets function better when businesses thrive and consumers are informed. Ideally, online advertising helps accomplish this. If, however, online advertising has been monopolized and constrained by opaque pricing and exclusionary conditions, everyone loses to that degree. I'd also add that Google and other big tech companies have been accused of a number of bad acts unrelated to antitrust or to competition. I myself have repeatedly expressed concerns about an anti-conservative bias by these firms, and I'll continue to pursue those concerns. But while I believe that issues like anti-conservative bias certainly have implications for antitrust, such as perhaps evidencing market power, today's hearing is not fundamentally about those concerns. This hearing is about an analytically distinct issue. It's about antitrust allegations in online advertising that are a legitimate subject of inquiry in their own right. And to be clear, just as I reject demands to use antitrust for social justice, I also emphatically reject using antitrust to solve other non-antitrust concerns. Today's discussions will, I hope, help everyone to better understand the online advertising market and how competition works or should work, and how it might not be operating as well as it could in that space. I look forward to hearing from our experienced and highly qualified witnesses. Thank you, and I'll now turn to Ranking Member Klobuchar for her opening remarks.